what AI can't do right now is that kind of human connection. And so what I'm seeing with managers is the managers that are really great at that human connection, at mobilizing people to do things in a certain way, are staying within organizations. They're becoming leaders within organizations. So the people that are going to go are the ones that don't have that natural kind of rapport, that human connection, that ability to mobilize people, move them in a certain direction.
Welcome to the Meaningful Work, Meaningful Life podcast, the show that empowers you to redefine the life you want and live your best life now. I'm your host, Francine Beleyi, and in season 11, On Purpose, How to Live, Lead and Thrive in the AI Age, we are exploring how to align personal purpose, leadership, and innovation without losing your human heartbeats. How do we stay centered, relevant, and impactful as AI amplifies everything around us? Today's guest sits right at that intersection. Nicky J Davies has spent more than 20 years helping coaches, consultants, and leaders move from being service providers to becoming strategic, trusted partners inside organizations. And her book, The Corporate Success Pathway, gives experts the clarity, positioning, and confidence to win consistent, meaningful corporate clients. So, at a time when AI accelerates change and increase noise, her framework helps people stay commercially relevant while staying deeply human. So if you are ready for a grounded, practical conversation about meaningful work in the AI age, you will love this. Hi, Nicky. Welcome to the Meaningful Work, Meaningful Life podcast.
Hi, Francine. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for accepting to have this conversation today, okay? So, Nicky, before we dive in, I love to know my guest at a deeper level. Take me back to your childhood. What did you want to do when you grew up, and how does that now connect with what you do today?
Oh, Francine, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have any idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I grew up in a family with two entrepreneurial parents. And so I knew how businesses operated. So that was my first introduction really to the world of work, was putting stamps on envelopes, putting invoices into envelopes for my parents' businesses. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that I liked business. But my parents were very much, you must move away from here, because I grew up in a very small community where I live today, actually, in Pembrokeshire, Wales. And they were very clear that there's a bigger world out there. You need to go and explore and experience it and make your own decisions. So there was no pressure to go into the family business. They didn't want that for myself or my sister. So I ended up working in the NHS, which is very different.
What are you doing at the NHS?
So, well, I guess
you are not a nurse?
No, I'm not a nurse. I'm not a nurse. Actually, my background is more around psychology and therapy and service improvement. But yeah, I ended up working in the NHS. And I guess that's because I love helping people. That's the theme that runs all the way through my life.
I can see the thread, yeah. So it's quite common for people not to have a clue what they want to do and just go around. But yes, that thread of wanting to help people actually manifests under so many different aspects, right? So, and now you work actually experts, shift from being service providers to becoming strategic, trusted partners. So what was the moment in your own journey that you realized that this shift is what is the real key for success?
Yeah, great question. So when I left the NHS, which was over 20 years ago, I started out in business, really helping organizations, helping businesses make changes and meet their goals. And as I was doing that, and I was also developing leaders in organizations, it occurred to me that a lot of us that come out of that corporate world and start working with corporates tend to see ourselves as being smaller in some ways. We diminish our experiences, we play small, and it's really easy to do that when you're faced with a skyscraper and you're going to go in there and you're going to talk to people that you haven't met before. So it's really easy to be intimidated. But I also know from having worked with corporate leaders for the last 20 years that they're not looking for the same kind of thinking that they get from employees in their organization. They're looking for something different. And so the likes of you and I have spent a lot of time doing professional development, personal development, really honing our skills and also our understanding of ourselves. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for something different. They're looking for a different perspective. And they're looking for that expertise that doesn't exist within their organization, or they haven't got the bandwidth to really drill down into the detail that we can. And so I started to think of myself more as a partner than a service provider. And it really enabled me to play a bigger game, be seen as an equal, and recognize that I'm an equal going into those conversations with really senior decision makers within organizations. And they got more out of me. I got more out of me. And we built these partnerships. So a lot of the companies that I've worked with have been clients for like 10, 12 years. We've really built that partnership during that time. And so we've got to a point where they will ring me up and say, "Hey, Nikki, we're thinking about this, or we have this issue in the organization. Can we just talk it through?" Which is much better. They get much better results bringing me in early to those conversations than bringing me in with a solution that they've already come up with. And it's like, "Hey, Nikki, can you and your team do 2-day workshops to this group of people on this topic?" So it's a big shift that makes a huge difference, not just for ourselves as coaches and consultants, but also for the corporates, the organizations that we work with. It makes a real difference to the impact that we make then within the organization.
Oh, wow, I love that. Yes, what you have done brilliantly, and knowing also that they are looking for a different perspective, because if they wanted some employees to give them input, they'll just ask the employees. So, as a consultant, is to come in, bringing your perspective, and also really positioning yourself as a partner. Well, that's really, really insightful. When you think about your own purpose today, what do you see yourself that you are contributing to the world, to the wider world? What would you say is your purpose?
Oh, that's a really great question. And I don't have like a cliched phrase for it because it evolves over time. But I guess if I so I see my purpose very much about helping people. That's the thread that's run through the whole of my life.
Yeah.
And in this situation, it really is helping people on both ends, whether it's coaches and consultants or it's corporate leaders to gain that clarity in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So whether it's having a conversation around leadership development, how do we develop leaders within organizations? My purpose is really to help them gain that clarity around what that means for them and what are they trying to achieve within the organization? What does that look like? And actually build something that is sustainable and helps with that. So I guess my purpose is it's not just about helping people, it's about helping people gain that clarity. I am very much about structure and systematic approaches to things. So it is bringing some structure to that clarity as well and a sense of direction. Yeah. So it's clarity,
Yeah.
structure, it's practicality.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, which actually leads me straight to the book that you wrote recently, The Corporate Success Pathway. So tell me, what prompted you first to write this book? And then obviously you're going to tell us what is in the book now.
Yeah. So I've worked with a lot of coaches and consultants over the years. And one of the things that I recognized was that a lot of coaches and consultants felt intimidated by the skyscraper and the idea of going and talking to corporate decision makers. And so they may have felt almost ready to actually break into that world, but they certainly didn't feel confident doing that. And that's been a lot of my work with coaches and consultants over the years, helping people that have strong expertise, but they don't have a commercial system for gaining corporate clients. And so I've been teaching strategies, teaching about marketing and selling and about structure for coaches and consultants in their businesses for a number of years, and thought, well, it's time to put a book together and it's time to get this out to a bigger audience. So the book is really a vehicle for getting this out to a bigger audience because there's only one of me, you know, and there's only so many programs I can deliver. And not everybody wants to go on a program. Some people, they want to kind of test some ideas themselves. So the idea with the book is that you can do that. It's very practical. There are 5 steps, just walks you through the 5 steps. So that was the thinking behind the book.
Yes, I totally get it. That's also what drove me to write my book back in 2017, personal branding in the digital, because actually, as you say, it's only just me, and it's to take it to a wider audience. And a book is one of the best avenue to do that because you can't be at many places at one time, but your book, one day I received even like an email from South Africa saying, wow, where did you get that book from? And he gave me like a platform that I have no clue what that platform is all about. This is the beauty of having a book that can reach people. You have no clue who you are reaching, but is just getting out there. So tell us about those 5 steps then in your book. Yes, yes.
So the first step is really about positioning. So step 1 is position. You've got to understand what it is that you're going to help organizations with and who your ideal client really is. Step 1 really works through that. It talks about WPO, who is it that you want to be working with? What's the problem that you solve, sorry. And, what's the outcome that you help them get? So if you just think about WPO in those terms, it will help you start to think about your positioning. And with the work that you've done around personal branding, you can't just rock up and say, hey, I can help you with your personal brand. Because there are so many people that say it in that way. So it's finding out what the nuances are about who you are and what you deliver, if that makes sense.
Yes, I love that positioning is like the first steps. I have a different type of step. The way I broke that down, me is like 7 steps, and your position is like my pillar number 2, which is know your audience as well, because but there's a little bit of pieces like between know yourself, know your audience, and lead your niche, which actually comes into positioning actually. So it's a
Yeah.
bit of pieces, but the way I broke my 7 steps is
Mm.
different, but the whole thing, the keys about positioning. But for me, I first say like is to define, clarify before you communicate, right?
Yes.
So, but I suppose that in your positioning, you imply those things as well, right?
Yes. It's
That,
exactly true. Yeah, that's
exactly.
exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've worked with people that have said, oh, Nikki, I'm a mindset coach, or Nikki,
Yeah.
I'm a confidence coach. And that isn't positioning.
No, no.
you know so it's going beyond that. So
Yeah.
whether it's 7 steps like
Yeah.
you outline in your book,
Yeah.
Francine, or
Yeah.
it's the WPO, and really thinking about what the outcome is that you help an organization achieve, those are the steps really to think about your positioning is key.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Cool. That is your first step. What's the second?
Yeah. So the second step is all about package. It's
Yes.
it's about knowing what your offerings are
Hmm.
and not overcomplicating this. So going back to your question about what's my purpose, and I've said about having clarity, it's also about keeping things really simple. So here you want to be thinking about just 2 offerings, two packages for corporates. One which helps them get a quick win around the topic that you have expertise around, and one which is your signature program. So it's a longer program. And the reason why I say that have a quick win and a longer signature program is because very often corporates will ask you to come in and help them get a quick win. They won't frame it like that, but it's almost like they test you with a
Mhm.
small program and see
Yeah.
whether you're a good fit for them as an organization. And then they'll look at your signature program. Sometimes they'll jump straight into a signature program. It depends. But
Yeah.
then on the back of that, what you can do when you're having a meeting with a corporate leader is actually just ask, are you looking for a quick win? Or are you looking for a longer solution? And if it's a quick win, it's probably the equivalent of a 2-day workshop and it's addressing a very specific issue. It's almost like on the surface. So, for example, in an organization, you might have a team that's going through a really difficult time. It's not performing very well. It's got all sorts of friction and dynamics going on within the team. Now, that's a bigger issue. A quick win might be helping that team have difficult conversations. And that's on the surface. It's not addressing the fundamental issue, but it helps them get a quick win. So you want to provide things like checklists, maybe even swipe file copy on how to have a difficult conversation. And then you want to, so if you do a quick win with an organization and you can imagine but if they see success on that quick win, they're going to invite you back. They could invite you back and you can go deeper with that team and
Yeah.
address some of the fundamental issues. But asking that question about, are you looking for a quick win or a longer solution? And having those two options ready enables you to move fast and give that clarity again for the corporate decision maker to make a decision.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. My methodology is much more like I'll call that like ecosystem of product that you may have. And what I like about this quick win long versus long term is that it helps you to deliver something that they can see value quickly and then all obviously invite you back because sometimes people want to say, just want to sell my signature product. And then they don't know that they can also sell something that can be very quick and then, deliver results right now instead of taking so long to try to just promote their signature product. So yes, I love that quick win aspect versus long term and also asking the question because don't assume, right? Don't assume that they are looking all the time for this long-term thing because people say, yeah, I would like to deliver, like, go to the root of the cause and stuff like that. Sometimes those are going to be quite long to get to the root of the cause and address them, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, good. So tell us about three, the price.
Yes.
What is this pricing thing? Tell me more.
Yeah. So this is about being clear about your pricing strategy because a lot of people will look at what their competitors charge and use that for basing their prices. And that's not very helpful because another business might have very different expenses to you. It's a really good idea, and I outline this in detail in the book. It's a really good idea to work out how much do you want your business to pay you. If you were on a salary from your business, how much would you want to be paid? And you have to take into account taxes as well.
Good.
And and then you want to be mindful of what all the business expenses are. And typically what it works out to be is if you think about expenses, if you think about profit, because we all need cash reserves for times when COVID lockdowns happen, all sorts of things that we can't predict. And, we need to have deep pockets for those times and also for investing in our business.
Yeah.
And you also want to have money there for corporation tax as well. So roughly, it works out that your income is probably 50% in total of the revenue of your business. So right there and then, if you know how much you want your business to pay you, say it's 100,000, then you know that including expenses, profit and tax, you probably need to have 200,000 coming in as a revenue in order to be able to take that income out of the business and still have cash reserves and money to pay taxes. So that's your first stab at pricing, is knowing what the revenue needs to be. And then you want to work out how many days do you want to be delivering. And typically in our sort of business as coaches and consultants, there'll be a third of your time that is spent hopefully on business development, because we need to be active with that. Another third of your time is probably going to be spent on things to do with admin, maybe writing some content for your programs that you don't get paid for doing that, and maybe writing some content for social media as well. So that's another third of your time. And then the remaining third is delivery. So if you work full time in your business, that roughly works out to be about 70 days that you are delivering to clients. And those 70 days have to, just using the example I used before, cover the whole 200,000 turnover, the revenue of your business. So right away, you can do on the back of a beer mat or whatever, you can take the 200,000
and
divide it by 70. Yeah. And you've got your number, in terms of a day rate. And that's the bottom. That's the bottom. And then you want to do a check in terms of, well, what's the value that I'm generating within an organization from what I deliver? Well, typically, coaching gives you a return on investment, or gives corporates a return on investment of about 7 times what they pay for it. And that's found out by the ICF in countless research. So if you think about that, you want to be thinking about, well, how do I measure impact of what I do within an organization? And what does that impact look like? Is it saving people time, and you can put a number to that if you're saving people time. Is it about maybe reducing staffing costs? So you want to get to a point where you can put a number to that, and then you can you can use that in your positioning. You can talk about return on investment. And then when you come to say your price, it makes sense to the corporate leader because it's based on the return that they're going to get.
This is also what you call outcome based versus task. So what's the outcome of the job that you're doing? That's wonderful.
That's right.
Yeah. That's very, very clear in terms of pricing what you do. So the fourth, you talked about having a third to actually checking and looking at where the next client is going to come from, which is prospecting, right?
Yeah. So this is a
How do you do the prospecting? Prospecting.
Well, yeah, let's talk about step 4 and step 5 together, because they're all about prospecting and they're all about promoting. So step 4 is prospect and step 5 is promote. Yeah. So let's talk about the two together because they go hand in hand. So the first thing, when we look at positioning from step 1, you've already got some ideas, because in the book I talk about, let's look at your experience. Where have you come from? What industries have you had experience of? Now, you might not want to go back into that industry. Probably don't want to go back into the organization that you worked for, because you would have left for a reason. But you want to be thinking about it. You want to be thinking about how you can leverage that, because you have that language that they use within that industry. You understand it. You understand how the industry is structured. You probably know the different suppliers. So, you want to be thinking about what what you understand, where your interests lie, and how that lines up with different sectors, different industries, different types of organizations. So I came out of the NHS, and one of the things that I did was I made sure that I tapped my network, and people in my network knew that I was leaving before I left, and knew that I was going to be facilitating change in organizations. So my first pieces of work actually came from my network. And very often what people do, what coaches and consultants do, is they feel reluctant to reach out to their network. And I get it. it's not nice when somebody says no or they feel a little uncomfortable and they're very polite about it.
Yeah.
But your network it's just like gold, absolute gold. So treat your network with respect, but do ask them for help. A lot of people in your network will want to help you. And the way that you can do that without feeling icky about it or salesy is just ask them for feedback. Just say, hey, I'm setting up in business. I'm going to specialize in personal branding. I'm going to specialize in leadership development. I'm going to specialize in helping female leaders through menopause, whatever it may be. And just ask them for feedback on your ideas, and they will give you feedback. And that feedback is gold. It really is. And not only that, but often what happens, and I teach this in my programs, and I've seen it countless times, people will then say, gosh, you need to talk to HR in our company. We've got that problem. If if you've really nailed what the problem is that you help solve, they will automatically give you that feedback about what's going on in their own organization. And you can always say, would you be willing to give me an introduction?
Mhm.
And from that way, very, very soft, you get a client. And I've seen that happen countless times. That works. But the other thing is to think about where these corporate decision makers actually meet. They don't go to the same networking events that you and I go to. They're not with small business owners. So they're going to be in industry specific events. And they'll also value being in rooms with their peers. So, one of the things that I talk about in the book is about curating those rooms, providing those opportunities. And you can do that through executive roundtables. So, inviting really senior, you've got to make sure that they are true decision makers. And that's really important. Invite them to a roundtable discussion around a hot topic. It may be around leadership in the age of AI, very topical right now. They're nosy. They're curious about, what's my peer just down the road in similar organization. What are they thinking about this? How are they looking at this? And they don't get the opportunity to have those conversations very often. So for them, it has a value. You want to lead with that value, and that's what they value is being in the room. So those are the sorts of strategies that work. And just one thing that I would like to add to that, if I may, is don't think that you have to reach out to HR because everybody is reaching out to HR. And one of my favorites is actually reaching out to chief operating officers or directors of operations. And the reason for that is because they have that line of sight on the kinds of issues that I help with.
Mm.
So you want to be thinking about, well, where are the issues showing up in the organization that I help with? And who has that line of sight and is a budget holder? That is crucial. You don't want to work with decision influencers. You want to be having conversations with decision makers.
As themselves. Wow, that is a really practical advice. I really, really love that. This is a round table of leaders. But let me bring this one. So, what actually would people may say? Well, would those leaders have time to come to those round table? How can I present that to them so that they feel that this is something that they want to go to?
Yeah. Well, it's because being in the room with their peers is really important to them,
Mm.
and you've got to get the topic right. So if it's a hot topic that they're grappling with right now, they will clear their diary to go along. And we're not talking, a protracted discussion. We're talking about this may sound a bit odd, but for me, what works really, really well is a bit longer than an hour, and an hour and a half is too long. So an hour and 15 minutes is a sweet spot for me.
What that 15 minutes is all about?
That 15 minutes makes all the difference. But I schedule it for 90 minutes, so
Yeah.
an hour and a half. And then, of course, you're letting people go early, so they've got 15 minutes probably before they go into their next meeting, and they're really grateful. So that's the sweet spot for me. But the trick is making sure that you have the right topic.
Yes, yes, yes.
So it's not a topic that's a hot topic for you is a hot topic for them.
For them. So you have that topic, but you present that. You are a bit like a facilitator there, right? So you're not like the experts per se, but
Yes.
you get them all together and then you say, okay, what about what's going on in your organization? What about your organization? And then you are kind of a mass minding kind of,
Yes.
in that. Yes. So I get that. That's quite a very high value way of spending time.
It
So,
is. And it's a lovely way of positioning you as somebody who's credible and
yeah.
has authority without doing anything. Like you say, you've already positioned yourself as credible and having authority in that space before you get to the roundtable discussion. And then what you want to do is you want to, obviously, you want to introduce the topic. So you're probably going to do a bit of research around it and talk about the topic for a little bit. And then you're very quickly going to get into facilitating, like you said, and asking really great questions to bring people in. But the lovely thing about doing an executive roundtable is you have heard what's going on in each of these organizations. So when you do the follow up one to ones with people, you're going into that meeting already knowing something about what they're struggling with. Now, you have to recognize they won't have told you everything because it's a public meeting. So you go in and you say, during the executive roundtable, you mentioned this. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? And by saying that, they usually open up and say, yeah, well, I didn't like to say everything that's going on, but there's this. So you very quickly get into almost like a discovery, well, it is a discovery conversation around what's going on within that organization. Now, there's a pivot moment where you move from asking questions, more questions to understand what's going on, to moving more into a sales conversation. And that pivoting question is what I tend to use and what I teach is I have some ideas on potential solutions. Would you like me to share some of those ideas with you? So you're asking for permission, and it pivots the conversation from understanding what's going on in the organization into potential solutions. And so it's a lovely way. It's a very gentle flow all the way through this process to actually getting a sale.
What if what they told you, you don't have the solution for that? What do you do?
So this is really important. I'm glad you brought that up because when you're planning your executive roundtable, you want to make sure that you have in mind your solutions at the back end. So the conversations, you're going to make sure that they stay true to the area that you can help them with. Okay? So I've seen people make mistakes and go
Yeah.
down rabbit holes because
Yeah.
they're interested. Oh, tell me a bit more about that. But they haven't got a solution for that
Yeah.
issue. It's just,
Yeah.
so it becomes a meaningless conversation, really. So you want to make sure that you're going into these executive roundtables and facilitating with an idea of your solutions in mind, how you can help, where you can help an organization. So you're going to keep that in mind when you go into the one-to-ones as well. Yeah.
That is a real balancing act. Yeah, definitely. You have to steer the conversation and say, yeah, come back here. Let's
Yeah,
not.
but also there's a space of time between the executive roundtable and the follow-up one-to-one. If you're realizing that actually this particular person was talking about something and had a slightly different angle and probably needs something else in terms of solution, you've got time before you have that one-to-one conversation to think about who's in my network that could help with this, and you can bring them on board your team. So it's not.
Very good
You've got
idea.
time to think about that.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, that is a very good idea. You can also, enlarge the pie, I'll say, and bring some other people
yeah.
within to offer something perhaps more consequent as a solution. Thank you so much for those great tips. Let's talk about the A word. AI. We've seen quite a lot of job cuts recently, even in consulting. From your vantage point, how is AI reshaping what organizations expect now from their partners?
Yeah. So if we just step back a moment and recognize what's going on in organizations right now around AI. So what I see happening are a lot of organizations are looking at workflows, processes. Where do we bring AI in? Where does it make sense to have AI? And what does that mean in terms of who we've got in teams, the kinds of skills? And so there's a lot of movement that's happening within organizations right now. And I think where we're probably heading is to flatter organizational structures. We're probably going to lose layers of
Mhm.
management because a lot of management tasks are around reporting, coordinating, and those tasks can be done by AI now. So, where organizations are at, and the kinds of conversations that I'm having with organizations is how do we keep our talents? Who do we let go? In light of changes, big changes in workflows in terms of whole departments. If you think about call centers, we've got chatbots now, and these chatbots have taken the place of a lot of what happened in call centers. So there's major, major changes to particular departments, and then there's workflow changes to other departments, and there's a flattening of organizational structures. So what organizations are looking for from us is help in terms of this whole process. So we're talking about help with change and transformation. So, for if you're listening to this podcast and your area really helps with people going through change, organizations going through transformation, there is loads of work out there for you. There really is. And organizations are looking at, well, how do we reskill? How do we upskill? How do we new skill people? Because we've got some great people who are in roles that no longer exist or won't exist in the future. Where can we place them and make use of their talents to best effect? And are there some skills, new skills that they need, or some additional skills, or maybe some upskilling? How do we do that en masse? What are we looking at here? So there's a lot going on in these organizations that we can help with.
Yeah, so actually, you talk about the fact that what actually is being lost in organization is that layer, the management layer, who actually in the past do a lot of reporting, coordinating, and I actually did also interview an expert who actually wrote the book Reshuffle, and actually his thesis is that actually AI is all about coordination, and you just point that out. Is there a way those managers are going to be reskilled when AI can do anything that they can do? Because that's where the big thing is. Like that is where the paradigm perhaps maybe need to shift. So if we don't need what those managers are doing there, how are you going to reskill them too? That's the problem. And then nobody knows even what kind of job is coming. So that's like the big question mark at the moment. What are you going to recycle them to? Somebody who used to in the past coming and doing report and doing reporting or giving you some content that AI is doing right now. What is this rescaling that you can do with that person?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because what AI can't do
Mm,
right now
mm,
is that kind of human connection. And so what I'm seeing with managers is the managers that are really great at that human connection, at mobilizing people to do things in a certain way, are staying within organizations. They're becoming leaders within organizations. So the people that are going to go are the ones that don't have that natural rapport, that human connection, that ability to mobilize people, move them in a certain direction. Those are the managers that are going to go. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, so and there are quite a few of those managers who are actually,
You know,
not very good at mobilizing people. That is where the opportunity perhaps is for them to actually relearn the human skills, right?
mm, yeah,
And actually is
yeah.
going to move them as to become leader.
Yeah, and you know, the smart ones will be thinking about this already, thinking
Yeah,
about how do I what do I want to do next?
yeah,
You've probably have coached people just like I have who've been made redundant. At the time, they thought it was the worst thing
yeah,
possible that could have
yeah,
happened to them. And then months later, they're doing something, they might be in a new role, completely different industry, completely different setting, maybe have set themselves up in their own business, whatever it may be. And they turn around and they go, Francine, do you know that was the best thing that ever happened to me?
exactly,
You
exactly.
know, you don't want to be seeing things in black and white. You know,
Mhm.
this is good, this is bad. This experience is good, this experience is bad, because we don't know. There's
Yeah,
such a mix in that
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
So it pays to just be neutral about these things.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because
I love
you
that.
just,
Yeah, I
yeah.
love that because actually what I do with people right now actually is like rediscovering their ikigai because usually in the past people will be having their identity stuck to a job, right? And then actually now what the world needs and what we are called to do is like bringing all those pieces together. You know, what are your passion, what you are good at, what the world's need, and what you can be paid for. And then when you look at that, and then you detach yourself from the job that you were doing. This is where I love the purpose idea at the moment. Is like you move to your passion is like what you love, but your purpose is what you can also do beyond yourself to others, to the rest. So when you look at all those things, and then you see like a wide range of possibilities, right? I was doing a little bit of the devil advocate earlier, but actually, this is the opportunity actually to become human, to move away from the industrial age, I am my job kind of thing, to I am who I am my purpose, I am my mission, I am what I'm here to do or to give other people as well. So this is like I'm seeing that as a beautiful opportunity to really re-become human and really live meaningful life right now in AI age. So that's my optimistic view of AI. Actually, I don't know how you feel or you think about this.
You know, if I think, so I've been in business for 21 years now. And during that time, I've seen a lot of changes. And when I first started in business, LinkedIn really didn't exist. Zoom didn't
Ah,
exist. You know, I, the tools and the platforms that exist now just weren't around. Websites were very clunky and really difficult to put together. So we and you wouldn't. So what you would start with would be a list of names and telephone numbers.
yeah.
You know, you wouldn't be DMing people on LinkedIn, things like that. So things change all the time. There are moments in history where things change really quickly and very dramatically. So the internet, when the internet came in, that was a major, major change. And I can remember, and I'm not that old, but when I started working, when I worked for the NHS, I had a very peculiar role. I was based within Manchester City Council. And they had a typing pool. And anytime I wanted to send a letter to somebody, I would sit down and I would handwrite the letter.
Wow.
Yeah. And bearing in mind, I had a computer at home, but at
Mm,
work, I would handwrite a letter. It would
mm,
go to the typing pool. It would come back the next day if I was
mm.
lucky. And if there was an error on it, it would have to go back again, and they would use Tipex. Do you remember Tipex?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, correction fluid. Yeah, and it would be typed and it would come back to me again.
Oh
So
no.
the pace
Yeah.
of being able to send something to somebody, and of course, then it went through the mail, so it was posted. So from beginning to end of that process, you're probably talking about 5 days, maybe a week. Now we have technology, which is it's instant. I can WhatsApp somebody a message and it's instant and they'll take more
The
notice of
T-Pex
that.
is your autocorrector.
You know, so these things change.
Yeah.
Technology changes all the time, but then there are sweeping changes. So the typing pool disappeared. What
Mhm.
happened to the people that were in that typing pool? Well, they reskilled, they upskilled, they got new skills, they came in as admin people. So there will be things that we can't see right now
Yeah.
that will change in the future. And we've just got to be open to that. And I think the biggest when I go, if I think about an organization that's going through major transformation right now, what I hear from frontline staff is, am I safe? Am I safe? And as a manager in an organization, that's what you're dealing with. You're not just kind of dealing with the changes that might be happening in your own role and thinking about the team as a whole and, the workflows, the processes, the systems that the team works through. You're also dealing with human beings that are asking a fundamental question. Am I safe? And you and I know there's no such thing.
Exactly.
But for
Yeah.
employees, particularly those that maybe are starting out, there's no sense of what the alternative looks like just
Yes.
now.
Yes. Yes.
It's a fundamental
Yeah.
primeval
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
um kind of reaction to what's going on. Am I safe?
Yeah.
And so we
And
don't
I think
know.
the manager's skill is to, answer those questions, even if they are not going to be safe per se, but being able to deliver or reassure them, even if they are not safe perhaps in this job and the AI is going to replace them anyway. But how can they themselves actually evolve as well?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And those are going to be the managers that
Yes.
stay
Mhm.
valued within the organization.
Cool, wonderful. That's cool. So you have coached also many, many consultants and coaches, as we say earlier, across different geographies as well, I think. What would you say is the biggest mindset shift that you see people who actually are finally able to win corporate clients versus those who actually stay there? What is that mindset shift? I'm sure that
Yeah.
that mindset level where we say earlier, they feel ready, but the confidence is not there yet. What is that
Yeah.
big mindset shift that some who have been successful have been able to do?
It's seeing themselves as an equal going into those conversations. Yeah. It's really seeing yourself as that trusted strategic partner going into those conversations and not as a service provider. Yeah.
Yeah, see yourself as equal. I love that. I really, really love that. So now we are coming almost to the end of our time today. If someone is listening today and want to start attracting corporate clients but feel quite invisible right now, what is the simplest, most practical first step they can take?
Get the book.
Yes, I think that's true. Actually, that's true. Definitely.
It will give you the foundation to get started. Yeah, and there are lots of practical examples in the book, as you'd imagine. Yeah, so it will give you a great foundation to get started.
And what would you say that, based on this conversation, what would be the key insights people can take away with them today? What would you want people to, get as a key takeaway from today's conversation we had?
I guess so. So one of the keys would be see yourself as an equal. So see yourself as that trusted strategic partner and not a service provider. But it would be recognize that you've got strong expertise, but you also need a commercial system to get these leads generated for your business. And that commercial system, that system, we talked about some strategies about reaching out to your network and asking for feedback and setting up executive roundtables. You want a system in place so that you don't get caught up in feast famine cycles, where you've won a piece of work, you're so sucked into that, you're not spending that third of your time doing business development, and you haven't got a system for business development, you'll come crashing down into a famine shortly after that. And then you'll spend a lot of time on business development and you'll
Yeah.
keep repeating that. So that would be the other key, is to make
Yeah.
sure that you actually have a system in place for your business development.
That is fabulous, fabulous insights you share, Nikki. I really, really love that. But finally, for you, what does meaningful work, meaningful life mean at this stage of your career?
For me, it's still that thread of helping people, you know? So for me, success is when I see clients getting success, and that warms my heart. You know, that is my purpose, is to help people get the success that they're looking for in their businesses or within their corporate jobs. Yeah, it's fundamentally that warms my heart.
That is wonderful, Nikki. Thank you so much for this thought-provoking conversation. So finally, where our listeners can learn more about you and your work and find your book as well.
Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere to
Yeah.
get a free PDF copy of the book. Yeah, in the show notes. And if you want to catch up with me on LinkedIn, I'm Nicky J Davies. You'll find me there. And yeah, I'd love to connect. Send me a DM.
As we close this conversation, I want to anchor one essential idea. You are not small. You are not just a service provider. And you are not here to deliver tasks in a world where tasks are increasingly automated. Nikki reminded us that in AI age, relevance doesn't come from doing more, it comes from shaping outcomes. What remains human and therefore valuable is judgment, trust, and the ability to mobilize people. But that shift started with identity. If you see yourself as a provider, you'll be treated like one. If you show up as a strategic partner, the room reorganizes around you. So here is your purpose sprint for this week. First, as an expert, name the outcome you are truly accountable for, not a deliverable, an outcome. An outcome is a measurable shift in behavior or capability that, exists after your intervention. One example of outcome is alignment, for example. Actions, priorities, and value are pointing in the same direction. That means they are aligned. Second, identify the real decision maker you serve, not influencers, not bystanders. And third, define how you show up in the room, energetically, verbally, and strategically. Message also 10 people in your network. Ask for feedback on a specific problem that you solve. No pitching, just listening. And track this conversation with the decision makers. So this is how you stay human and commercially relevant in the AI age. So if you want deeper clarity on your strengths, contribution, and purpose in this fast-changing world, you'll find a free Ikigai quiz on my page at francinebeleyi.com/podcast. And the show notes of the episode are also available on that page at francinebeleyi.com/podcast. When leadership struggles to adapt, the consequences don't stay theoretical. They show up in trust, risk, and real-world harm, which is exactly where we'll go in the next episodes. So I'll see you next week for another episode of this season 11 of Meaningful Work, Meaningful Life podcast. Until then, dream, act, and make an impact. Lots of love.